Good morning, everybody. Thanks for taking time to join the webinar. We're going to be going over BBMDs, which stands for BACnet Broadcast Management Devices. They're used when you're going from one network to another on IP networks, school districts, multi-campus, multi-building campuses. It allows you to have one front end in one building and have the whole system communicate through the different subnets up to it. I'm Jeff Gray with Building Controls and Solutions. BBMDs are used when a control system is communicating via BACnet IP from one subnet to another. So an example of different subnets are different networks. So they kind of threw me off when I talked to an IT guy and he'd tell me different subnets, because to me, when I was learning networking, subnets meant the subnet mask, that 255.255.255.0. Well, when you're talking to a network IT guy and he's mentioning different subnets, he's talking about the networks themselves. So the example is building A is on network number 192.168.1 and then .xxx, and .xxx is the number of the device that's on that network. Building B is on network 192.168.2 and building C is on network number 192.168.16. Always keep in mind that only one BBMD can be used per subnet, per network. One thing that I did, kind of mentally to get my head wrapped around how BBMDs work was I looked at it as a BBMD is like a doorman for a private club, right? The private club is your network. The BBMD is your doorman to get into that private club. And then the doorman has a list of people that can get in. So we'll talk about BDTs here in just a minute, but that's how I wrap my head around it. BBMD is your doorman to let you into that private club. So communication from network to network is done through a UDP, which is a user datagram protocol port. The most common port that you'll see when you go to set up your control system, and they have it pretty much set by default because BACnet has reserved the port 47808. But know that 47809 to 47999 ports are unassigned. So they're not taken up. They're free to be used. And then by the systems talking on a UDP port, it allows you to have multiple control systems on the same network and never have them talk to each other by using different UDP ports. So examples on that is, control system A is set up on UDP port 47808. Control system B is set up on UDP port 47812. Control system C is set up on UDP port 47815. By having those different UDP ports, those systems will never see each other. Another example, real life one, is we have a system up on Hill Air Force Base, and there is another control system that's up there also, and they're on the same IP scheme, same networks, talking from building to building, and they are on 47808, but the control system that we have up there is on 47810. And by having those two different UDP ports, we never see each other. We can use the same device instances, the same NSTP network numbers, and they'll never have any conflict as long as we do not tie into each other's UDP ports. So BBMDs have to have a virtual network number when you're setting them up. The virtual network number is kind of like the network number that each one knows they're supposed to talk on with that UDP port also. Each BBMD within a broadcast group must be assigned the same BNet number so that they know they're on that same wave. I was thinking kind of an example would be like on a walkie-talkie. You know, you're on that same channel. So your UDP port would be, say, channel 4, and then your BNet would be, you know, that sub channel 3. Subnet masks, this kind of confused me in the beginning, is on your BDT table, you'll enter in the IP address of the other BBMDs that everybody can, you know, all the BBMDs can talk to, all the private clubs can talk to. It allows you to have a subnet mask in that BDT table. By default, it's 255.255.255.255, so 4 sets of 255. What that means is that is a global broadcast on those subnet masks. You should always, unless you were told by an IT professional, you should always leave those set default to the 4 sets of 255 because it allows that global broadcast on those subnets. I don't think that I have ever had an IT professional tell me that I could not use the 255, 255, 255, 255 on my BDT table. When I'm setting up the IP information of the device, I use their subnet mask and their default gateway. It's totally 2 separate subnet masks. It gets kind of confusing that way, but just know when you're setting up your BDT that you should leave a default with also 4 sets. So then we've got the BDT, which is your broadcast distribution table. That is that list that the doorman has of who he will allow into that private club. So each BBMD has to have a BDT table. That acts as a routing table with information about all the other BBMDs on the subnet. You know, that's his list of who he'll let talk. All BBMDs should have the same BDT entries. So if you have, I've got kind of an example on the next couple slides. So in the middle, this is kind of an intranet, right? So it's not so much going out through the World Wide Web. This is more of a private IP, private Annex J BACnet IP setup. I didn't really want to dive too hard into the public IP side of it because that's, you know, a whole nother rat's nest. Private IP is the majority of BBMDs that you end up setting up because you're on a campus, you know, you're working with the local IT guys. They have all their buildings set up on different networks, different subnets, but they all are trunked together through their network setup to where, you know, you can talk to each other and not have to go out through the public. So we've got the intranet, which connects all the buildings. Up top, we have building A. Building A is on 192.168.1.1. That's the gateway of that router. Off to the right, we have our BBMD device that is 192.168.1.131. And then we have another device that's on that network of 192.168.1.141. Once another network, another BBMD gets into building A, so if building B is looking over to building A, it gets through the BBMD of the 1.131. They're on the list. Once you're in the private club, you can talk to all the patrons, anybody that's on that network, everybody that's in that club. So a BBMD just allows you into that network. Once you're in that network, all the IP devices, all the devices, BACnet devices that are there in that network, you can see, you can talk to. And that's why there's only one BBMD per network, per subnet. If you have more than one BBMD on a network, it's kind of like having two roosters in a hen house. They fight each other. They're both trying to control the traffic in and out of that network, and that's where you get a lot of communication issues. And if you do kind of a BACnet scan, you'll get kind of NR nulls. You'll kind of see the device, but not all the description, not all the information. Usually that's kind of a telltale that you have two BBMDs on one network, and both are trying to run the communications through that network. Building B is on 192.168.2 network. The router is .1, which is your gateway. The BBMD on this one is 2.3.1, and this one has two devices. You can have 30 devices, 100 IP devices on each network. The amount of devices in the network is kind of irrelevant. Once you get into that network, you can talk to everyone. It's the BBMD, and only having one that is really important. Building C is on .3.1. Building 4 is on .4.1. And then I threw in building E and building F, just mostly to get away and show that, the 192.168, that is kind of the default private IP networks. But, a lot of times we'll run into networks where the IT personnel has set it up as 205.120.2.1. That's the gateway. And all of the devices are 205.120.2. whatever the number of that device is. And then building F is 10.10.10.1 for the gateway. And the BBMD is 10.69, and other devices are 10.23, then 10.34. I also kind of set this up so you could take note that, these BBMDs are at .31, and the other devices are .41. This one's .21. The number of the BBMD doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a lower number than all the other devices. It could be, .254, basically the highest number that you could set on a regular 255.255.0 network. The last digit of the BBMD doesn't matter. The thing that matters is that it's a static number, static IP, in all the BBMDs, and every BBMD on their BDT table has each other in it, so that you create this mesh that will talk through the intranet. So the next slide is kind of an example of a BDT table entry. So on the BDT table entry, you only want your BBMDs on there. You do not want to add, so we've got 192.168.1.131 as the first entry. That is the only IP address on that network that we need on our BDT table. We do not want to add 192.168.1.141. I see a lot of BDT tables that get set up that way, where people will enter the BBMD address, and then they also enter in other devices on that network into the BDT table, and they should not be in there, because the BDT table is going to start looking for those other IPs, and they're not there. They're not a BBMD, so they don't communicate, and you start getting some communications issues. So if you notice, the only entries that we have on here are the 6 BBMD buildings that we have. And the 205.120 and the 10.10.10 network will talk to the 192.168.1234 networks. So they don't all have to be, the same prefix on the same, prefix network number. They can be any network number that the IT department has set up, as long as they are on that BDT table entry. That's pretty much all of it in a nutshell. I know that it's, about 20 minutes worth to go over that. I figured there was going to be a lot of live questions, so.
Hey, Jeff, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
So if I'm registering as a foreign device in Allerton right now, I'm actually doing it right now. Do I have to change the network number, the virtual network number? Or do I keep that the same as the one in the table?
Okay, so good question. So registering as a foreign device to a BBMD allows you to have a computer that, you know, your front end basically, or a device that does not really support a BBMD to link up to a BBMD as a foreign device. So so let's go here for an example. Let me click on this. So as an example, building A through F, all of these devices are on UDP port 47808 as the default UDP port. If I had a computer that was on, 10.10.0, a totally different network, I could register as a foreign device to any one of these BBMD IP addresses with a UDP port that is different than the network that I'm trying to get on. So my local UDP port on my computer is going to be 47809 or 47810. Any number that's not 47808. You're going to want to set your VNet up on the same number as the VNet, but your UDP port will be different when you register as a foreign device. So got another text from BP. What is your recommended brand agnostic BBMD? BBMDs are kind of gender neutral, right? They're brand neutral. It is a BACnet standard. So with it being a standard, every brand gets set up basically the same way, because they have to have those same rules of they have to have a BDT on them. They have to have a broadcast distribution table with the other BBMDs so they let them into that network. The subnet mask should be, the /32, which is 255.255.255.255. They have to have a VNet, and they have to have a UDP port. They're not so much limited down to a different or a specific brand. I know Niagara, when you get into a Jace and set that up under your IP network, you select it to be a BBMD device, and then you can go into your BDT table and enter those in, which actually kind of reminds me, let me bring up my calculator. So UDP ports come in as hexadecimal a lot of times. So I'll share my calculator, and if we come in here up to the top and you go to programmer, a lot of times, I don't know if anybody's ever seen that BAC0. That is a hexadecimal value for 47808. So if you type in 47808, you'll notice up here you get your BAC0. That's the hexadecimal for that. 47809 is BAC1, BAC2 is 4710, and then it kind of goes from there. So anytime I get into like a Niagara, I will actually come in and type in the, so say I had BAC2, I would come in, type in BAC2, which tells me that's for UDP port 47810. Joseph Carter, would local IT of the campus provide the BDTs, or would they be able to provide the BBMDs and or UDPs being used? So in my experience, we have control over the UDPs. we have control over the BBMDs because it's whatever device we designate to be the BBMD of that network. Working with local IT, they give us the static IPs of our devices to be on their networks with the Subnet Mask and the default gateway and DNS information. So as far as the local IT goes, we get those static IPs. We can, say they give us 192.168.1 and a range from 50 to 60. We could number all of our devices 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, and make 53 our BBMD. And then the BDT table, so say they had another building that was a 192.168.2 network, 50 through 60, we could number those 50, 51, 52, and we could have 51 be our BBMD on that. And then network 1 at 1.54 and network 2 at 2.51 would each be in the BDT table of each BBMD. I hope that kind of explains that. We have control over which one's a BBMD and which UDP ports are being used.
Jeff, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I guess my real question was if there is unknown devices or devices that already have are taking up a UDP port on the same network that we don't necessarily know what they are. Is there a way we can, I guess, scan the network or something like that to find out what is actually taking up a UDP port? Or I guess that's what I meant by the BDTs. If there's a way to list out BDTs of unknown devices on any given network.
Not that I can think of. I always suggest, and on every job that we do, that I and the other guys I work with, I always tell them, make sure you create an Excel sheet with all of your IP addresses of your devices for the different networks, and I always have a column for BBMDs. So if you're lucky enough to have that sheet and know, that makes it way easier for kind of an application you're talking about. When you do a scan, it doesn't really say that it's a BBMD and has a BDT table in it when you do a scan that I have ever really ran into that I can think of. Applications like that, you usually have to get into kind of the configuration of the device, so you'd have to get into the configuration of the IP of the Jace. Most of the time, I've found people just kind of as general, they'll set the lowest IP address of the devices as that BBMD, and that's usually how I'll set it up too. I always try and use the lowest number kind of as the BBMD, that gateway to get into that system, just to make it easier. So yeah, no real easy way to find it out. But once you do find the device that is the BBMD, then in that BDT table, it will tell you what the other networks BBMDs are. And so it helps make it a lot easier. So you don't have to go to every device on every network. Once you find one, you should be able to kind of tell the other networks BBMDs and BDTs. Was that better, Joseph?
Yeah. I realized that was about as good as it's going to get. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I call those kind of booger problems. They're a booger to find sometimes. Kind of like a communication comp trunk error. So you got to just put the time in to find it. Feel free, give me a call. If you have any questions on BBMDs, any questions on networking. I guess I kind of forgot to tell you guys that I've actually taken networking class. It's through Allerton. I'm actually, BACnet network certified. So it's the BBMDs, BDT tables, networking, Subnet Mask, gateways, troubleshooting any issues. Feel free, give me a call. And then besides me, I have Salt Lake, I've got Cameron and Bryson. Houston, I have DeMond, and out of San Antonio, we have Brandon. And I'm glad to work with all those guys. They're all super smart, and feel free to reach out to any of them for networking issue questions, anything that way too. So they will get you the answer, even if they don't have it right off the top of their head. If everybody doesn't have any more questions, hope we kind of hit on it. This is kind of basics. Like I say, it starts getting a lot deeper, but I really didn't want to go too far down a rabbit hole. So if everybody's good, I appreciate you guys taking time out of your morning, and have a good day.